4.5 years ago, I was here sitting with my friends, looking at the sunset, watching as one of the biggest chapters of our lives has come to an end, and a new one presents itself for the next 3 to 4 years. That year, even with a global pandemic raging through the world as well as the country, out of respect of the health guidelines as well as social distancing, we were able to close off that chapter of our lives, watching the sunset as we get out of high school and into college. Now, 4.5 years later, I come back here, graduated from college, and about to experience probably the most turbulent parts of my life as I continue to navigate what it's like now, figuring out what exactly I want to do with my life. This video, if you're wondering, is another reflect video. If you've followed me these past 4 to 5 years, I have done something like this where I reflect upon the past year. I haven't done this since 2 years ago, and I didn't do one last year for personal reasons. I actually did record a reflect video last year, but I never really got the chance to, or even have the heart to upload it as well as edit it to the best of my ability. So this time around, even though I would say I would continue tradition and reflect on this past year, and along with that, make up for the year before that, I think for this video, I actually kind of want to reflect back for this past half decade, since we are now basically halfway through the 2020s. So to start off, 2020. That year, as a lot of you and everyone should know, it was a world-changing time. A global pandemic ravaged this world, this country, and a lot of our lives. For me, it was definitely a very disheartening year. A lot of us lost our high school graduation. I was the class of 2020, so we basically lost what we wanted to celebrate, a graduation out of high school and into adult life, as well as the beginning of college. But that year, I think, was also a sort of turning point of what I wanted to do with my life. At the beginning of the year, I worked on a high school PSA with the leadership at my high school called Every 15 Minutes, and that highlighted drunk driving, DUI, and underage drinking. That was one of the best experiences I had in my last year. And then after that, a week later, everything got shut down. And then a few weeks later, I get a message from one of my classmates saying, "Hey, do you want to do a sort of senior montage?" And that I did. And I've kind of mentioned this in that year's reflection video. And what I'll say is that that video, it was definitely a very fun video to make, albeit I think a little bit mentally exhausting, because there was a lot of times where I thought I wasn't doing something right, and I also felt a lot of pressure to meet the expectations that I think were placed upon me to create a senior montage video that would encapsulate our time in high school, but also to make up for having to lose an in-person graduation and getting to be with all of my peers who are about to go off to college. Now, fast forward to later in the year, I would then enter college, albeit not in person. That year was the first year of my college experience, and supposed to be where a lot of us would be young, dumb, and broke and just experience what college is like firsthand. Except my year didn't really have that. What actually happened was we were all stuck on Zoom, and what then I would find were people that I actually got to know through even on an online environment through different means. Like, it wasn't even class in college that allowed me to get closer to other people. It was actually just being a part of student organizations. And because of that, I get to meet people that I consider now really good friends, and we still talk ever since graduation, and from time to time even hang out. Fast forward into the next year, and I would later become an officer for that same student organization. To be frank, it was definitely one of the more leap of faith decisions I made in college. I didn't know what it was like to experience a student organization in person. In fact, at that time, 70% of that board never really knew what an in-person environment was like for that student organization. So a lot of us were going in blind. And I'm obviously skipping ahead a lot for that year, because the first half of the year, it just felt like there was a lot that happened that went off pretty quickly, and also it was still online. However, I think the turning point was when I actually got to meet college people for the first time in person, especially at the end of that academic year. It was the very first time that I get to meet people that I could have actually met during my first year in person, get to know a little bit better, and as well as getting closer to many of the people that I got to meet as well. And it was very gut-wrenching that it was only just that weekend that we went in person to see those people, only to sooner or later not see a majority of them ever again. But after that, it was that summer, I got to meet more people from the college that I go to in person as everything started to open up, and the talk of the pandemic slowly going away really began to take shape. And then fast forward to the beginning of the academic year, and that year was basically sort of our official freshman year, even though in a technical sense, that was more or less just our second year in college, but it was our first year being in college. That academic year was by far one of the most fun I had in college. A part of me really missed a lot of what happened that year now looking back, because I think it just felt like we were really doing a lot of the things we had the chance to do before we started to really pay attention to what lies ahead after college. But that year also sort of made me find new perspective in what I want to do. Again, I became an officer in that student organization, and I would become in charge of leading one of the biggest events of that student organization of the year. So in the end, what happened was the next year, I would face a daunting task of bringing that event in person for the first time since 2 years prior, because again, we were coming back from the COVID. But eventually, it worked out in the end. We learned a lot of lessons that I think were really useful at that time, and it gave me a new experience that I still cherish to this day, that I was able, along with my to accomplish something that I thought was almost impossible because of the regulations that the school had upon hosting an event, especially since that winter quarter in the 2022 was actually really bad in terms of the pandemic. Like, it was open up and then it just skyrocketed, the number of cases. You don't have any idea how many COVID scares we had that entire year. But after that, time was up. We then moved on to the next year, 2022 and 23. A lot happened that year that affected me a lot. First and foremost, my thoughts of becoming what I want to do before I went to college. As many of you know, if you don't know, I am actually a film major coming out of UC Santa Cruz. From the get-go, I didn't really want to do something like a Hollywood film. I more or less want to specialize in documentary because I like to tell stories about other people, especially in my opinion. I wanted to highlight more on the Asian American diaspora as well as the AAPI community. I was rather limited on what I wanted to do back in UC Santa Cruz. For example, I went into a class known as a narrative workshop class, which is more or less just creating a short film. I struggled a lot mentally that quarter because while I did have a cast that I can rely on, scratch that. I have a crew that I can rely on. I just didn't have a cast that I could rely back on. And I think for me, that experience led me to believe that I really cannot do something like that ever again. Something that would later on transpire into the following quarter, winter quarter again. I did a documentary workshop class for that class. And to be frank, I think I could have done a lot more with that class. My biggest weakness that I learned was that I'm never the one to take action on my own. My biggest weakness is that I hesitate a lot on my decisions. I'm rather indecisive about what I want to do. It kind of affected me how I want to pursue myself as a sort of filmmaker to tell a story. What ended up happening was I originally wanted to talk about mass transit in Santa Cruz. However, the person that I reached out to had a lot on his plate because actually around that time in the Bay Area specifically, it was one of the biggest storms in record history that happened. And so because of that, a lot of circumstances caused that person to not be as responsive as he was, and I had to drop that idea. And then instead I went to a local museum to talk about what it's like being a museum curator, but I wish I could have done a lot better. In terms of the student org that I was in, I got to perform a lot more. I started to do dance within that student org, and I decided to do more singing performances. If you followed my channel for a while now, I have done covers ranging from Cantonese, Chinese, even Japanese actually. I have not done a single English cover because honestly, I really prefer doing like singing with it on, how do I do this? I prefer to sing that connects with my heritage. And as much as I would want to do an English cover, I actually want to highlight my heritage, which is Cantonese. That being said, we move on to spring. And spring, I think, was definitely the pinnacle of my documentary making. That quarter, with the help of my professor, big shout out to Joseph Herb, he helped me create a documentary that I've thought about since entering college. It is surrounding why Asian and Asian American students would pursue something like film instead of the usual STEM and business. And that film really changed my perspective in what I actually want to do, make documentaries surrounding Asian American identity. And luckily, I actually was able to get this film selected into 3.5 film festivals. Yes, 3.5. The half is actually a screening, not really a film festival, but if you want to count it, you could say 4. But 3 of those, unfortunately, were in SoCal, so I couldn't really attend because I'm broke as fuck. We move on to that summer, and for the first time, I traveled alone. Yes, but for study abroad, actually. In my life, I actually never traveled alone. For me, though, I actually decided to travel to a completely different culture, that being Morocco. There, I actually got to learn about Moroccan cinema as well as learn a little bit of Arabic. If you ask me whether or not I know Arabic, I don't. I actually don't. I don't remember anything that I learned, unfortunately, as much as I really enjoyed speaking that language, even as basic as it is. The homestay family that I stayed with was by far the friendliest people I got to meet. The people in that program was the best people I got to meet. They were by far the most supportive people that I got to meet during my trip there, because as someone who actually was of East Asian descent, I really felt a lot of uncomfortability, because there aren't many Chinese people, East Asian people there. And it definitely got to the point where, funny enough, I did get kind of racially profiled, because a lot of them would say ni hao to me, which if you're a merchant, it's understandable. You're trying to reach out to consumers. But pedestrians are a different story, but let's not get over that. The best part of that trip was getting on a camel in the Sahara and getting to ride that for a short period of time. Which leads me into the next year. I became the co-president of the student organization that I previously mentioned that I was an officer for. From the get-go, I should have been more mentally prepared in making this sort of year run smoothly. But there were so many circumstances within my life that failed, that made me feel like I didn't really do a good job. I did finish my film major though, so I was only focusing on like my East Asian Studies minor at that time. But in the end, I think my senior year could have been so much better, especially my tenure as co-president. I wished a lot of things could have changed under my watch, but in the end, I've tried my best. And I think the takeaway that I got from that experience is that a lot of things don't really come your way, and a lot of things shouldn't have gone to my head as it was. And it sort of led me to a more mentally draining spiral going through that year, especially winter quarter, my final quarter of college. And I, looking back, feel like if I was more mentally stable, more mentally healthy, I would have done a much better job for that student organization. Aside from that, I was able to at least take all the small wins that I was able to garner throughout that year, and I took away from it with a lot of life lessons that I learned on my own, as well as a lot of lessons that I think that my successors will soon learn from for the next upcoming years. So come spring quarter, it's the first few months of when I graduated from college. Winter quarter was actually when I graduated. So what happened that quarter? First and foremost, I actually was able to find new work. However, it did take a lot on my gas and my mileage, but I actually became a graduation ceremony photographer, quote unquote. Because it was my first season, I didn't really get the chance to sort of do the photography that is said on the job title. Instead, I was more of an assistant. But it was fun to actually experience what it's like being a professional photographer during that time. For instance, I actually got the chance to go to different colleges that I never would have thought of going. For example, Berkeley. Other than that, it was one of the most eye-opening experiences I had for what I want to do. Now, you'll notice a trend in this sort of segment of this year, 2024. Because I graduated from college with a film degree, I also have experience in photography. To put it shortly, last 2 years I actually did graduation portraits for graduating students. I did 2 groups 2 years ago, and then I did like 5 groups this past year. Eventually, I sort of started thinking maybe I should be a photographer. But then throughout this past year, now I'm thinking maybe I should become a videographer. So that's a little disclaimer. But to put it in short, later on, I also became a photographer for the K-12 picture day, which is like, if you remember, if you were young, actually no, when you were young, you had like a little picture day, especially in elementary school, where during the day you get to go to the multi-purpose room or the gym, and you get your picture taken for the yearbook as well as your ID card. That was a fun experience, and I can't really thank enough for that opportunity back when I was still working with them. The season's over, so but still, I still view that point as like a very fun experience. And I got to learn a lot more about the profession of photography. But was that something I wanted to do? I'm still debating on that, because months later, I actually started taking up freelancing gigs. I've done photography gigs, I've done videography gigs. So far, I've done like event videography, event photography, portrait taking, many things. And right now, I'm still deciding on what I want to do between those two. I am working, mind you. I'm still trying to pay off like a lot of like the bills and yeah. But to put it in short, I don't really have a full-time job. I have multiple part-times that I'm working on right now. For instance, I am working at a dance studio as a videographer, and then I'm also working as a photo booth attendee, and then the other 2 photography companies that only work seasonally. So I have a lot of my work cut out. And also in March, I'm about to travel around the States, becoming a dance videographer for a dance competition company. So where does my life go from here? I don't know. I have done not so many actually. I've done several gigs with many different groups of people around the Bay Area. I got the chance to work with a video agency company back in San Francisco, and I started to think about doing something that he does, because it was something that I actually wanted to do from the get-go. Telling stories about other people, and for me, especially about Asian American community, the AAPI community. I want to do that, and I want to keep doing that moving forward. While it may seem like I'm more of a photographer based on my work experience, I really love being a part of a video production. I will actually take you back to when I mentioned about the senior montage for my high school. I said this was more of a turning point, because after that, I started to feel like my editing passion start to fade away. I felt like I got burnt out, and then eventually I realized later on that editing hasn't really been what it used to be. I learned this, quite frankly, the hard way this past year, that editing has slowly become more of a chore than something I wanted to do. And so a part of me wants to become my own boss, my own person. What is the future of this channel? I'm trying to do more covers as much as I can. I haven't done one since like last year, actually. So I want to do more of that. This channel will also face more of a rebrand because I also want to showcase and become of service of those who need it for in terms of videography, maybe even photography, but we'll see how that goes. I think the takeaway from these past 4 years has been that my life has much more room to grow. And I think the takeaway that I want you all to have is that there are many lessons that you'll learn throughout college, throughout life itself, especially right after graduation from college. Some of us are now in grad school. Some of us are taking like a gap year for grad school. Some of us want to get into the workforce right now. Meanwhile, for me, I think the best route that I want to take is becoming my own boss. Maybe I run my own business. Maybe I become a content creator. Maybe I want to tell stories on my own. But for right now, I'm still wondering what I want to do. And with that, thank you for watching. If you want to stay in the loop, my Instagram is there. If you want to follow it, if you really want to, I don't care, honestly. If you want to also subscribe to this channel, you can. My uploads will never be consistent because I am really busy with what I want to pursue in my life. If you were wondering whether or not there was a video for last year, I think I deleted that clip because I didn't want to edit it anymore. I didn't even want to think about it, which is fine. But all in all, I'm happy with the life I have right now. I think after what happened these past 2 years, especially because I think these past 2 years have been, I think, one of the more mentally challenging years of my life. I am definitely looking forward to what next year holds. And I'm really excited to find out new perspectives of life itself and continuing to do what I love to do. Making stories of other people, doing what I love, producing videos for others to enjoy. You might not be able to see it, but as the clouds part a little bit, I can see the city from here. Thank you for watching. Have a happy new year, and let's hope 2025 is a better year for all of us.